Carithers. At Thurl High School, we had Dr. Moss, Larry Moss. And at Mays High School, we had Helen Carithers, and she was single and married to the job because she really did a great job, and those students would get that way. And then, of course, we would leave there and go to Harper High School, Charles L. Harper High School, and that was the money and banking magnet. So all the students who are interested in going into money and banking, you would get them together. And students had to qualify for all of those programs. And then, of course, at Brown, we were dealing with communications. So it's the whole concept was to get students, according to their own gifts and talents, to reach their full potential. And I do know that everybody has a gift. Everybody has a gift. It's a matter of being introspective and finding out what your gift is so that you can promote that gift to have an impact on the larger society. And that way you become a self-actualized adult. But that was a school of thought with education for a period of time there. But I'm really worried now because what with computers now, we don't have the same ideas. Winston Churchill, and I used to teach my students that one of the characteristics of an intelligent man is to be able to read, write, and speak your mother tongue at least with competency and efficiency so as not only to understand but to be understood beyond a doubt. But now we flip on the TV, and I'm not going to call his name, but he's doing really, really well, but his command of the English language is not that good. And I said, standard English is your money language. You got to learn how to speak standard English. And so some of our standards are just different. And then in elementary school now, I did work next to two principals in elementary school, and they've taken out cursive writing. I mean, how are you going to sign your checks? And then all of this talk about new math. It's like last I heard, if you start counting from 1 to go forward to infinity, that would be the same numbers. If you go backwards with minus 1 to infinity, are they not the same numbers? So what's new about math? I mean, what's new about it? Why are you going to confuse the students and come up with all this new math? Math isn't new. If you don't know your tables, you can't multiply, you can't divide. I mean, there's some things that are tried and true, and we just need to stick with it with education and give people the foundation. Now you walk into a bank and you can't even get your money if the system is down. We're relying too heavily on the computers. And my kids wanted to know, who is Mr. Google anyway? And we're taking Mr. Google for granted. Anything you want to know now, you just type it in on the computer and then and Google it, and then Mr. Google will tell you the facts. You have no way of determining where the facts came from or whose perspective it is. But see, back in the day when we did term papers and you had to write out everything and use APA, you had to have footnotes and you had to have a bibliography of the references of where you got that information from. So now, I'm glad I lived to see it though, but now when I type in something, the computer will anticipate what I want before I even hit enter. I said, how did the computer? So I don't like the idea of machines beginning to think for us, because I think that you should be able to analyze, criticize, synthesize information, and be able to think on your own. And the moral dilemmas that we're in now. And that's a whole nother thing, but back in the day, during segregation, there was not a plethora of all the religions, and therefore it was Christian-based. Now, it's amazing to me, though, how the United States Constitution is Christian-based. But back then, in the morning, we would have what you call devotions, and everybody would stand up and pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation. And back then, we didn't even have under God in it. We put it in there, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We stood up every day to say that. So it was like patriotism. And then we would go through some scriptures in the Bible. I mean, there were some things you were supposed to know if you were educated because it came from scriptures in the Bible. If you were intelligent, you knew that. And so, but it gave a premise, it gave a foundation, it gave you something to draw on. And those people who didn't go to church and who were unchurched, they still got at least a devotion to start the day, so you would wake up and feel a spirit of joy and a motivation for the task at hand for the day. But now, and I saw it happen even during my time in education, they took that out. Not only did they take it out, but you can get fired. I mean, Mary Emanuel over there at Thurl High School was having a prayer during homeroom, and one of the parents reported her, and she was called to task by the Board of Education and told her in no uncertain terms that was not to go on in her homeroom and that she would be fired. So there are a lot of issues, a lot of issues, but I think that you should never, ever underestimate the executive power of the human mind. And we need to really study it and try to make sure that we do have liberty and justice for all. You know, Black lives matter, but all lives matter. And so as an old lady now, and I'm glad to be an old lady, because my friends are expiring all around me. Started with Dorothy Borum, who was a Spelman girl, and then Portia Scott, that worked with the Atlanta Daily World. She and I were very close and used to go to Silver Sneakers together. She's checked out. And then Sandra Clements, who was a Spelman girl. And she had an international ministry going. She checked out, and as I said before, my friend Sharon Watson Devonish, who was Clark, has checked out. But we remained friends all these years because we were the Atlanta University Center. And I took classes at Clark from Dr. Pearlie Dove, Methods and Materials for Teaching. And I understand she's published a book that I'm trying to get a copy of. But there was no me and my. We were all soldiers. We had a play going on with Dr. J.P. Cochran called Fenian's Rainbow. And you could set your watch with the time that Julian Bond used to come and pick up Alice from play rehearsal, because we were in Fenian's Rainbow. So students from Morris Brown participated with the students with the Atlanta Morehouse Spelman players too, you know. It was a collective effort. We all used the Trevor Arnett Library. So the idea of this separatism within the HBCU community grieves my spirit too. I mean, we need to be on one accord. The whole idea is to have a multifaceted kind of experience, especially during your college years, so that you can meet this mean old world head on. Well, those are the ideas about education, and I just think that with the appeal for human rights, that appeal for the best education possible was visionary. And then there was an attitude sometimes in the black community whereby that if you really had a need, that the doctors from Mahara were not as good as the other doctors, and that honey, if you have an issue, and people didn't talk about cancer openly like they do now. And then even now they call it the big C. Nobody's scared to talk. But if you really had a need, you better get yourself a white doctor. Or if you have a legal need, you better get yourself a white Jewish lawyer. and that kind of attitude pervaded the black culture in a way. But there again, that's why I said that we need to make sure that students are able to think for themselves and able, like I said, to become problem solvers and problem formulators, so that that kind of warped misconception won't live. So, and in terms of the voters' rights, even now that I'm in my 70s, when I saw how they came up with all this ID you have to have, some senior citizens don't have that ID. And it's amazing how you can still vote in absentia and send your ballot in, and you won't have to have all that ID. But it's by design. It's by design. Whatever can happen to keep African Americans from being able to have that voice in voting. It's like once you find out how to play the game, and you got them all, the rules down packed, you know, you can play the game, we know how to do this. Well, you're doing too well here. Well, wait a minute. They're getting ahead. So then they change the rules. So that's the way it seems to me, and that's my perspective. But all I got to say now is, in summary, with that appeal for human rights, that's what it was. It was an appeal for human rights for the common good of all humanity. And the world is still a wonderful place. With those gifted students I was telling you about, some of them were really visionary. I remember one of my students came in and he said, "Miss White, I got the idea for, well, we don't have to worry about Georgia Power anymore." He said, "What we can use is bioluminescence." I said, "Use what?" He said, what we need to do is to study the lightning bug, and we can come up. It's like, but I learned to embrace everything that the students had to say. I think that was Brian Nesbitt that came up with that. Then I had Martin that came in, and he said, "I got an idea." I said, "What's that?" He said, "I tell you what, to connect all these continents." He said, "Right now we have the submarine." He said, "What we need is nuclear power to power the submarines. You get in, use the nuclear power to shoot the submarine from one continent to the other." Another one came up. These were all these far-fetched, crazy ideas that will manifest maybe. You never know. You never know. But they were the students who were your high-level communicators and your high-level problem solvers and your high-level problem formulators too. Because, see, sometimes there are people who are not the solvers, but they can put the problem together so you can examine it, you know. So that made it all good.
Do you remember anything about the Heart of Atlanta Hotel?
No.
No. Okay. What about the protest at Hurt Park?
No more than the fact that we had hecklers coming out of the woodwork. And thinking back, too, we need to remember that not just blacks were involved in this movement. We had some whites that were helping us, too. But even among ourselves, we took an attitude one while where this is our fight, we don't really need you. I mean, you know, just, we don't need you. But downtown Atlanta, and it's amazing to me now, even as we speak, how you can get on Peachtree and go from one end to the other and see what happens downtown Atlanta now with more and more blacks who are but I think that's an appropriate euphemism, Hurt Plaza and Hurt Park, in terms of what went on. I don't remember any more details other than the heckling and the water hoses and the dogs and just whatever they could do to humiliate you. They used, but we were undaunted. We were undaunted. We were undaunted.
What about Grady Memorial Hospital with the desegregation?
I was born in Spalding County, Griffin, Georgia, in a clinic, Copeland's Clinic, but my mom migrated to Atlanta when I was an infant. I do know, and my brother was born at Fort McPherson because my dad was military, you know. But Grady Memorial Hospital had the segregated side, and it was called Hugh Spalding. And of course, you could go there to be born. I like what Marvin Arrington always says. He said, "I'm a Grady baby." But the services there were